What's going on, Aces? Welcome back to the channel. I hope that you guys are having an amazing Thursday evening. So listen, Patrick McDonald has come out in defense of Garcelle, which I'm here for. I don't feel like she really deserves all the hate that she's been getting lately. And also, he gave us a little bit of the behind the scenes look at, how Bravo executives have treated or mistreated, I should say, all of the workers, the different shows that he's worked on. He said a lot of the crew and even the cast, the talent, are sometimes overworked, underpaid, stressed out. And he said that he was essentially burnt out and iced out of working at Bravo. He said he's worked on many different shows as a producer, Real Housewives of Atlanta, Beverly Hills, Vanderpump Rules, so on and so forth. He said his favorite, the way that it was, run seamlessly, was Winter House and Vanderpump Rules. And he said that the rest were kind of, chaotic. So I'm gonna let you guys hear in his own words, his commentary, and then I will jump in at the end.
What's up, y'all? My name is Patrick McDonald, and for the last 5 years, I've been producing reality shows for Bravo. Most recently, I was serving as the supervising producer on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, Orange County, and Vanderpump Rules. That is until recently, when I was iced out and essentially blackballed by all my shows after I started creating adult content on subscription fan sites. Now, why would I start creating adult content? Well, I was extremely burnt out, overworked, and exhausted by the toxic work culture on a lot of the shows that I worked on. I produced 13 seasons of Bravo across 9 different shows. I'm acutely aware of the inner workings and the work culture across the board at the network. Most of these shows, you're working 12+ hour days, 6 days a week, 3 to 4 months at a time. Then I would look at these people in my life who are content creators, and they're working far less than me, making a lot more money than me, doing whatever they want, whenever they want, living a life of freedom. By contrast, I started to look at how much of my life I was devoting to work, and it made me really start to question what I was doing with my life. Now, I'm not an idiot. I knew there was a chance when I started making adult content that it could jeopardize my work with Bravo. But on the other hand, it's 2025. There's Real Housewives and other Bravo reality stars with fan sites. So if someone that's a face of the network can create a fan site, certainly it shouldn't be a problem for someone who works behind the scenes, right? We're seeing guests on Watch What Happened Live being corrected when they use the word hooker and told to say sex worker. We're having adult entertainers bartending in the clubhouse. I thought, maybe it wouldn't be an issue. Maybe then I could kind of pick and choose which shows I take, evening out my work-life balance a little bit and supplementing my income with the fan sites. I'm not sure if me being iced out was done at a network level or at a production company level, but all I know is that once I started creating this content, things went radio silent with the executive teams on my shows. I haven't heard from the exec team on Beverly Hills since we left St. Lucia, and I haven't heard from the OC exec team since we shot the last reunion, where it became abundantly clear to me that word had gotten out about my fan sites. Once I realized I was being iced out, even though I knew it was a possibility, it still hurt my feelings, to be perfectly honest. For the last 5 years, I've given so much of myself to these shows, pouring my energy, heart, and soul to telling these compelling stories, all while enduring incredibly intense pressure from a lot of my bosses. Now, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone more passionate about their job at Bravo than me. I have loved Bravo and been enamored by Real Housewives ever since I saw Sheree shifting Kim Zolciak's wig out in front of Jimmy John's on Atlanta back in the day. I love these shows. I loved them then, and I love them to this day. And I love them because I know how much they mean to people, because I know how much they meant to me. I was proud and honored to work on these shows, and as it turned out, I was really good at it. I came into the Bravo world in a bit of an unconventional way. Several years ago, I myself was on a reality show much like these shows called Fire Island. And I was on that show during one of the darkest periods of my life. I was battling a serious drug addiction at the time that I was keeping a secret during production. So I know what it's like to be on one of these shows while your life is crumbling around you and you're trying to just keep it together. It's a really unique position to be in, and one that's very hard to understand until you go go through it yourself. Shortly after Fire Island wrapped, I was a homeless junkie, shooting up 3 to 4 times a day and was sleeping under bridges, But then I went to rehab. I got clean and I started to rebuild my life. I've been sober for about a year and a half, working 2 jobs, one at a grocery store and one cutting down trees when I got my first offer to work on a Bravo show. I was so beyond grateful for that job because I honestly thought I'd never work in TV again. So I took it and I ran with it and gave it everything I had. I started out as a logger on Married to Medicine and I quickly climbed the ladder from there. My next show, I got a promotion. My next show, I got a promotion. By my 4th show, I was promoted to field producer and I was running a crew on Real Housewives of Atlanta. Within the next 2 years, I was promoted to supervising producer, working directly under the co-executive producers. And for the first time in my life, I really knew I was great at something. And that was consistently affirmed by my supervisors and the cast members that I produced. Most of the showrunners would tell me that I was one of the best field producers they'd ever worked with. Cast members who were notoriously challenging for producers in the past, requesting that I produce their scenes. I was in my element. I was killing it. I was really freaking proud of myself. For the first couple years, I think I was blinded to the toxic culture on a lot of these shows by my excitement to be there. But after a while, I started to step back and question the way these shows were being run. You can see how overworked and stressed out a lot of my colleagues were. And I would look at a lot of the gay men who were showrunners on this show and try to picture my life if I was in their position. And honestly, most of them seemed unhappy, lonely, and some of them quite miserable. Is this really what I want out of my life? Is this the trajectory I want to continue down? So time went on and my passion for the genre started to wane as a result by how poorly cast and crew were treated at times. And for someone who loves Housewives as much as I do, I was quite shocked by how disenchanted I became. I also developed a bit of a moral dilemma on a recent season when a cast member's sexuality was at the center of a storyline. I found the internal conversations about this person and what they were going through to be extremely insensitive, problematic, and quite frankly gross. A person's coming out journey, if they have one, is entirely their own. Full stop. Now, let me be clear. I'm not talking about friends of this person who are also on the show who would naturally be inquisitive and ask questions about someone's life and who they're dating. I'm talking about the entity of a TV show digging into someone's sexuality in a way that's salacious and sensationalized. That's what the internal dialogue felt like to me. Producers encouraging other cast members to ask direct questions that would put this person's sexuality on the spot just felt really invasive to me and crossed the line that I wasn't really comfortable with. I would see people at the executive level who have worked with this cast member for years, seemingly very close, talk to this cast member in a seemingly compassionate way. And then when the cast member would walk away, they completely changed their tune and spoke of this person and what they were going through with such a lack of empathy and respect, even going so far as to using a gay slur that was truly shocking. I thought to myself, if this is how they treat this person, someone who has bled out for this show and this network in ways that most people will never know, if this is how they talk about them, they are never going to have my back. And it turns out I was right.
Okay, so he's talking about Kyle and her situation with Morgan on the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Well, let's go ahead and get into part 2 of his video.
It occurred to me that maybe Bravo isn't even aware of some of the volatile working conditions that these producers and crew are subjected to, especially on these cast trips. On my first international cast trip, I found myself in hand-to-hand combat with a Real Housewife. There I was in my Lady Gaga t-shirt, making $1,000 a week as an associate producer, freaking like Simba and Scar with this housewife, trying to stop her from physically assaulting another cast member with a metal pole. Needless to say, these shows are stressful enough without the added pressure of an egomaniacal showrunner with incredibly unrealistic expectation. Oftentimes, the co-executive producers are left doing damage control for all the things the showrunners screw up, while also being the only ones who actually get anything done. I've always been a firm believer in trying to leave a place better than you found it. So here are a few things that I think need to change at Bravo, and just a few things that maybe need to be brought to their attention. Stop overworking your producers to the point of complete exhaustion. The amount of pressure and the expectations put on producers and crews on these cast trips are truly insane. You see, these shows aren't unionized, so there aren't protections in place to ensure that employees aren't being mistreated and overworked. Now, some shows do these trips correctly. Vanderpump Rules, for example, staggers their crews and their producers to ensure that everyone is given adequate rest. That's a testament to the showrunner and the production management on that show, the seasons that I was on it, because they actually cared about the well-being for the cast and crew. And that was reflected in the vibe of that crew. People loved working on that show because of great leadership. Winter House was another example of an executive producer who made sure that producers and crew were staggered. And that, too, was one of the happiest crews I worked for on my time at Bravo. On the other hand, you have showrunners that run these trips like tyrants. They expect every producer to be at the cast rooms at 8 a.m., and they will keep every producer on working until like 2 a.m. Now, if you were a general in the Army, would you send every one of your soldiers to the battlefield at the same time? Of course not. Send them in waves to ensure the longevity and endurance of your army as a whole. Same thing applies here. Why would you overexert every single producer on your team unnecessarily when you could stagger them and keep everyone rested and on point for the entire battle? These trips are a battle. On a recent cast trip, myself and a group of crew members traveled 22 hours to an international location. Now, a travel day is a work day. You aren't resting, you're taking flights, you're changing planes, you're receiving gear, you're working. And God forbid you are traveling with the cast. Try being the only producer traveling with 7 housewives on an international flight. God love them, but you are not resting. It's a lot. So we arrive at the hotel after having traveled and worked for the past 22 hours straight, and we receive a text that says, "Welcome. Please drop your bags in your room and freshen up and be in the lobby within the hour for a full day of scouting." Mind you, the executive producer and many others had advanced to the location days before and got a full night's sleep that none of us had. Yet, even though we had just finished a 22-hour workday, we were expected to begin another workday without a wink of sleep. That is unacceptable and I'm pretty sure highly illegal. But on these trips, because there isn't much of a network presence, the entire cast, crew, and production team is at the mercy of one showrunner. And some of these showrunners are wilding out on these trips. The number of times I've consoled a crying segment producer in a foreign country because they couldn't find a pretty enough basket-weaving biscuit shop that would meet the incredibly unreasonable expectations of the executive producer. Now, this job is not that serious, so nobody should be driven to the point of tears working on a show about screaming ladies in fancy places. Also, stop overexerting your crews. The camera and audio teams on these shows bust their asses following these cast members around, all while carrying extremely heavy equipment. So every measure should be taken to ensure that they are well taken care of. But unfortunately, there is this culture of content is king on these shows, meaning that nothing is more important than what will appear on the screen. Well, I'm sorry, but I think the health and wellness of human beings should be king. I can't tell you how many times I've popped into Video Village to be like, hey, B Crew was supposed to break for lunch 30 minutes ago, and I'm met with we're in the middle of a scene, we'll break them when we can. All while this guy's like sipping on a Diet Coke and eating a cheese plate without even consulting the people that are holding the heavy cameras and audio bags that are making this show possible. It is a maniacal abuse of power, and it needs to come to an end immediately. I also want to specifically mention the loggers, because these people are some of the most overworked and underpaid people in the entertainment industry. These are the people who are transcribing the scene work so they can write a summary to send to the network to read what happened for the day. They're expected to be very detailed and accurate. Now, first of all, the logger position should be an associate producer position across the board. A lot of these shows will call them loggers so they can pay them less for doing the same job as an associate producer, but these people work so hard and they deserve that AP title. The loggers have to work their full 12-plus hour day, and then they have to go home and write a summary, which can take hours, especially on the cast trips when we're shooting all day. That is a lot of writing. So these loggers go back to their rooms and are sometimes up until 4 a.m. and then have to be ready to work again at 8 a.m. By the second day of the trip, they are zombies. And the worst part is that they often aren't even paid for all the extra hours that they spend writing. Can't tell you how many times a logger has complained to me that production denied their overtime requests because they didn't request it in advance. Now, how can you request something in advance when you don't know how long it's going to take you to write something? The entire hot sheet system needs to be overhauled and streamlined because as it stands, it's completely broken. I would encourage Bravo to reach out to every logger and AP on the most current seasons of all the shows and ask them if their hours worked accurately were reflected in the hours that they were paid for, because I can guarantee you that in a lot of cases, they were not. Because these shows are produced in the field by a production company and not the network, there is rarely a network presence on set, if at all. There's occasionally a network exec on cast trips, but they usually pop in for a day or two and sit at Video Village watching the monitors. They're not involved with production logistics. I would encourage Bravo to send an HR representative to location for the entire duration of these cast trips to ensure that the cast and the crew are being treated fairly, professionally, and given their adequate breaks and rest time between shoot days. Another thing I'd like to see change is let's stop telling cast members how to feel. There were so many times on my last few seasons where I'd arrive to a scene and the housewife would tell me, now I know I'm supposed to feel appreciative to her about this, but I just really don't. And I'm like, who told you you're supposed to feel that way? the executive producer. It is such a disservice not only to the cast member, but also to the producer who's trying to produce an authentic scene for reality television. And also it just makes for bad TV. It's clunky, bad producing. A good producer will arrive to a scene, talk to their cast member, and find out how they feel. If the cast member doesn't know, a great producer will talk it through with them and help them figure out how they feel. A bad producer will just tell them how to feel. Several housewives on my last few seasons have been complaining that they've never been told how to feel so much. Because here's what happens. Say the producer convinces the cast member to say they feel that way. So they do it. A day or so later, the cast member gets upset in a scene, and then their true feelings come out. And now they look crazy, and the audience is left thinking, wow, what a flip-flopper, what the hell? Well, that's the producer's fault, and the cast member's left to eat it. So if you're a housewife or a cast member on one of these shows, and a producer comes in strongly pressuring you to feel a certain way, just know that that producer is producing you with an agenda, and they probably don't have your best interest at heart. Always go with your gut and stay true to your own feelings, because you can always stand on your truth, or else it'll come back to bite you, which I have seen happen on multiple shows. These people are compelling enough on their own. We don't need to be telling them how to feel. It's ruining the show, so stop doing it. I'd also like to say that there are so many wonderful, hardworking people that make these shows. Many of the producers, cast, crew members have become dear friends of mine over the years. I've talked to several of them since being iced out, and not one of them has told me that me making adult content made them uncomfortable. But you know what many of them have told me makes them uncomfortable? Holding a camera or an audio bag for 4 hours straight in the tropical heat without a break. That makes them uncomfortable. While there were many things that I loved about my time with Bravo, it was no longer a place for me because it wasn't conducive to a happy life. I'm no longer living to work. I guess the big lesson here for me is to never pour all of yourself into a company or an organization that will cast you aside in a heartbeat. We're here for like 2 seconds. Live your life for you and you alone. So if the content I'm making now sounds like something you might be interested in checking out, my username across all platforms is @ThickTrick1. Come find me. Let's have some fun. If my final act as a Bravo producer was bringing my smoking hot adult content creating superstar boyfriend to the Emmys as my date where I was a nominee, I think I can live with that. And I think I can live with spending a month in Thailand celebrating his 40th birthday, which...
Okay, so you guys heard the crazy conditions that the Bravo crew work under. So hopefully after, he comes out and speaks out, that they can do some kind of, if not a complete overhaul, at least make it more manageable, where they're not losing employees and burning out their cast and their crew. But I want to let you guys hear what he says about Garcelle before wrapping up the video. So let's go ahead and take a listen. This is quick.
I also want to quickly touch on Garcelle announcing her departure from the show, because I've seen some wildly negative things said about her online. I could go on for days about what a pleasure Garcelle was to work with, but if you really want to measure the character of a real housewife, ask the crew members who they like to shoot with the most. You can learn a lot about a person by the way they treat the people that they think can do nothing for them. Any morning when the crew found out that we were spending the day with Garcelle, they were ecstatic. And they most definitely do not feel that way about all of the ladies on the show. And I'm so proud of Garcelle for prioritizing her life over a television show.
Absolutely, right? I get that vibe from Garcelle. The fact that she didn't read Erica Jane down to the ground for filth when Erica Jane was talking about how she wished that she was more interesting. Garcelle, listen, anybody else, myself included, I would have read Erica Jane and all of the indictments down for filth, okay? Garcelle's a self-made millionaire, and Erica Jane, she's not. I'll just leave it. I'll keep it cute. I'll leave it alone. But I appreciate Patrick, coming out and saying what he had to say about Bravo. And I feel like they've had multiple lawsuits. They've had people speak out against them. I feel like they're still being sued by Leah McSweeney. I know Bethany with her whole thing with them. Nene Leakes went through her thing with them. They need to do some introspection and clean it up over there. But anyway, you guys, let me know your thoughts. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will talk with you in the next one. Take care, aces. Bye.